We need to act now if we're going to save these coral reefs. And it's all about working with Mother Nature. I'm Austin. I'm a marine biologist. I live in the Fiji Islands, and I've been working on corals, researching corals for over 30 years. I can say that the first corals I planted were in maybe 78, but I didn't really get involved in doing research on it until I was at the College of Micronesia, and that was probably about 87 that I really started working. And then I started finding out so much incredible stuff, and so I was able to get my PhD in Puerto Rico and do coral work in Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Belize, and in Fiji, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, Papua New Guinea, a little bit, Kiribati, Samoa. The techniques, they work everywhere. And what's really a joy is working with the community and watching the young people get so excited seeing the corals growing. And I did that for years. And I came to Fiji and working on corals, planting corals, but I didn't have a solution for bleaching at that time. And all of those corals died in a mass bleaching. But what that did to me was it caused a change. In me, it was very, very depressing to see all that coral die. And I realized I'm never gonna plant another coral again unless I know it is a heat-adapted super coral. So the big change in my model occurred because of this big problem. And so if you replant corals with the same corals that were wiped out, you know, little corals are coming in, they grow. They are not heat-adapted corals. They're from the cool part of the reef. You have to go in to the hottest pocket you can possibly find. The same species are often in those hot pockets. You can find the tabulate corals there. You can find the staghorn corals. You can find the different digitate corals there. You go and you search the really hot reefs near the shore in some restricted bay areas, and you bring them out to cool waters. And that's what you do your restoration with. You put your nursery there. So this is what I noticed also. After the first year of those 4 nurseries, they were doing nicely. We're all, wow, this is great. And I looked at the reef right around it, and all these baby corals were coming in by the thousands, tens of thousands. So all baby corals coming in. And I said, well, I guess we didn't need to do this. Mother Nature would fix herself. And everybody said, yeah, I guess we didn't need to do this. Maybe we don't have to do anything with these corals. What are we gonna do? But what we learned was this. The corals that were coming around the nursery, if you go another half a kilometer away, no babies. Okay, so the reef wasn't coming back except for around our nurseries. And I began to think, oh, these corals aren't making babies yet. They're too small. Oh, maybe they have a smell, because they do stink. I mean, when you pick them out of the water, they're very, very aromatic, okay? Can be nauseating, okay? And so I thought maybe these corals are giving a signal to come here, you know, to call the babies. And now the scientists have proven that's true. So these corals are emitting a fragrance in the water that the baby corals can smell, and they want to sit down. And when they sit down, they know there's this pink coralline algae. They like to sit on the pink coralline algae if it's there. But if it's dirty and if there's algae everywhere, even if they want to settle down, they can't find a place, okay? So we got 2 things we got to do. We've got to get a patch on a dead reef. We got to get it's all covered with yucky stuff. The corals can't come back, okay? And they also don't want to come back because there's no scent there. So we get our patch of coral. It's calling the babies, hey, here's your place, but also the fish. So we don't want to plant, you know, all our corals flat because they don't give any habitat. Also, the algae will overgrow them. We want to put them on a structure so that they're above the algae. The fish will go in right away. And we put enough coral there, it provides good shelter, a good smell. And then they will clear this halo around it. And the baby corals are not only being called, but they have a good habitat to settle. That's what we want to do, okay? That's what we're doing now. So this model is very different from what I used to do. Okay, it's still planting corals, but planting corals that have been proven to be strong against hot water. And so they don't bleach when it gets up. Now, those hot pockets in the future, are going to get to be so hot that the fish will die, and even those corals, even the super corals. If a coral can survive at 35, when it gets to 37, they're going to bleach and die. But if you bring that coral that's adapted to 35 out to where where the corals now bleach at 30, okay? It's 35, it says, well, I'm okay, okay? And then as bleaching continues and the world gets hotter, it goes to 32 on a bleaching, 33 on a bleaching, 34 on a bleaching, and it's still okay. Will it get beyond 35 there on the cool outer reefs? Not according to the present models, okay? So according to the present models, it can at least survive the next 50 or 100 years. The first time I saw corals really being impacted by climate change was in the year 2000, when a mass bleaching hit Fiji. And it was unexpected. And the hot pocket was south of Fiji, and they saw it coming. But this hot pocket came and drifted over Fiji, and the whole southern part of Fiji, the corals, over 90% of the corals bleached pure white, and many of them went on to die. With coral bleaching, you need to understand that a coral polyp, and there's these tiny little polyps that make up a colony, okay? The coral polyp's an animal, but it has algae inside it, algae. And these algae are photosynthetic, and they make food for the coral. And they give sugar to the coral and oxygen, and the coral gives the algae nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so forth, and gives them shelter and protection, and carbon dioxide as well, that they use for photosynthesis, okay? So it's a beautiful relationship. But with bleaching, that breaks down, and the algae ends up being kicked out of the coral. Produces poison instead of sugar. It's kicked out. So here you have the white coral. How is it going to survive? Because it gets most of its energy from the algae. The algae gives it sugar, and now no more sugar. And it struggles because it has to eat in order to get the nutrients, and it's just very difficult. So if a coral is partly bleached, it has some algae producing some sugar, and then it might survive. But if it's totally white, totally bleached, the chance of it having enough food to survive is pretty low. So this is, so it just depends upon where the coral is. If the coral's on an atoll where there's no nutrients in the water is very clear, it's more likely of starving. If the coral's in Fiji or the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, near a source of nutrients from the land, it might survive because the plankton is more rich there. Supercoral is a coral that can tolerate hot water without bleaching, without this imbalance starting. So I would call a supercoral if the water if the bleaching temperature is 29, a supercoral would be a coral that doesn't bleach at 30 or 31, right? But it's not that super, okay? But we have corals. 29 is the bleaching temperature of the normal cool reefs, you know, the reefs that are surrounded by ocean and the waves are breaking. 29 is the bleaching temperature for a lot of corals, or 30, around that, right? But if you go to these inner reefs that are up in the lagoon and up near the islands, those corals won't even bleach at 30, at 32, at 34. They still won't bleach. And some of those corals we have that won't even bleach at 37. So what is a supercoral? It's a coral that has got super algae inside, or that can protect the algae from bleaching. Okay, so there's two different sources of bleaching. Okay, but the corals in these hot pockets, their primary source of resilience is coming from the algae that can continue to photosynthesize in spite of the hot water. So people say, don't use the word super, because what if is it really super? Well, it's super against hot water, okay? But is it super against disease? Okay, now, the nice water on the outer reef is so beautiful and clean and no bacteria out there. But this water near the land, oh, it's full of bacteria, fungi, viruses, all kinds of pollution. Any coral that's hot water adapted, my idea is it's also going to be more resilient against disease. So they might be super not just from the standpoint of temperature, but also disease, okay? So these supercorals really are super, and we've seen this. These hot pockets are natural. So you'll have a barrier reef, then you'll have a lagoon, and you'll have fringing reefs all around and pocket reefs. And then way up in these inner lagoons, the water gets really hot because the circulation is restricted. So tide comes in and cooler water comes in, and the tide goes down and they get hotter and hotter and hotter, right? So these hot pockets are natural. They've been here for millions of years. And so corals have had a long time to adapt to hot water. So basically a hot pocket is a restricted flow area of water, usually near land, or it can be inside a lagoon. Sometimes you have double lagoons with lots of reefs, and then it's an area of shallow water also, because if it's deeper, it takes longer to warm up. So shallow water. You can find hot pockets by just go to Google Earth, and you can look at the aerial photos or the satellite photos, and you just zoom down and you try to find an area that's definitely shallow. You can see, oh, that's got a sand bottom, it's shallow. The coral's on the edge. You can look and see for the brown spots that indicate coral, and you can say, oh, this looks like good corals. With the Reefs of Hope strategies, what we've done is we've developed a series of methods. And one of our methods is we'll go and search for corals in the hot pockets, okay? Now, we'd like to put in temperature loggers to do that, and if we can, we can. But we'll go into what we know is a likely very, very hot pocket, just based upon the geography there. It's restricted flow, it's right up here, and it's very shallow. And what we do is we look for the corals that we know they live on the main reef. We look for tabulates, digitates, and staghorns, and some of the bottlebrush corals. And so we'll find a population of those corals. And one thing I do is look, is it a large coral or a small coral? If it's a really small one, I leave it. It hasn't really been tested very many years. I'm looking for a coral that's gone through the summer. So we'll find a coral that we want, and we'll trim a bit of it. For some of the species, the tabulate corals, the ones that are like tables, we like to plant them on cement cookies, we call them. We plant them on a cookie because what happens, it kind of melts over that cookie, attaches, and then the middle will rise up and make the right growth form. And so we have the whole mother coral. For a typical coral, the staghorn or the digitate corals, we're trying to get out 8 to 10. We put them on a little rope, about an 8 millimeter to 10 millimeter rope, and we just open the eye and we put the coral in there and close it. So we put them about about that much distance apart. We're creating this rope nursery in our stress test nursery that will have a single rope as a single coral species, but it's also from the same original parent. So this is all one genotype. And so we create that rope. We have it the pre-measured distance in our nursery. So it's about a little over 3 meters long, 3.5 meters. And so our dimensions are related to the dimensions of the iron that's available. They're 6-meter bars. We cut it in half, so we have a 3-meter bar. And then, so we create our nursery based upon what's available everywhere in the world. So once we have our corals on the rope, we'll go tie it into our stress test nursery. The stress test nursery is in moderately warm water. It's not far from the hot pocket, just out a little bit. And we'll grow them there for a year to see how do they grow. Do they get disease? If they get disease, the entire string, it's one genotype of one single species, all the same from the same original parent. Okay, we'll retire that if it gets disease. Or if in the summer it bleaches, we'll go ahead and retire it. We put it back on the reef. If it thrives in that year, in the stress test, we move it out to our main gene bank nursery. So a gene bank nursery needs to be located where hurricane waves, storm waves won't destroy it, okay? but it needs good water circulation. It needs to be cool water. So what I look for is this. I look for a sand patch right out on that outer reef. I look for a sand patch behind the barrier reef, not too far from the pass. I want that nice cool water to be coming in. I want a place where when the waves come across, that it's about 1 meter lower than the reef flat. So you want a place where if you can find a nice nursery area where it quickly drops into this patch, and it could only be, 2 meters deep there. So I'm looking for about 2 to 3 meters deep sand area where it's a very quick change from the reef flat there. That's a sweet spot because your nursery is 1 meter below the waves. So the waves just roll right over the top and they don't touch it at all. And we've got multiple nurseries in Belize, in the Dominican Republic, in Jamaica, in Fiji, where hurricanes have hit our nurseries. And right here, they don't get damaged because the waves go right over the top. If it wasn't right beside the reef, if it was over there, remember, then the motion gets spread and you might have some problems. So you want to put it right up there against the reef flat. And also, you want the fish to come in and clean your nursery. So you don't want to create a nursery that requires toothbrushes and people cleaning it. The fish are supposed to do that job. Give it to the fish. So here's your reef flat and it's drop off, here's your nursery. And what we found out is if we cannot get the little parrotfish, they're afraid to cross the sand. So we found out that even if it's 3 or 4 meters away from the reef, they're afraid to cross that. And so the algae can get all over this nursery. What we do then is we create A-frames. We make these fish house structures, or fish houses, but we like to put staghorn corals that grow quickly there's refuge on the reef coral to this. So we build a bridge or two to the nursery to encourage the little juvenile surgeonfish and parrotfish to come and clean it all up. And it works. It really does work. How we do the outplanting onto the stressed reef or the cool water reef, putting supercorals, it depends upon the method that you choose. Once you now have done your outplanting site, however you've done it, as smaller branches, if there are not many enemies, you might be able to plant cement small ones. Or if there's a problem and there's no fish there, you might want to make a structure of an A-frame to increase fish habitat. Even though the corals are small, you have a lot of them planted together. The whole purpose of that is that these corals will cause a change on that degraded reef. So if there are already lots of fish, you can plant small ones as long as the fish don't eat them. What I'm finding is that when we plant them on an A-frame or as larger colonies to get instant fish habitat, then we get a better impact. So we're finding that the best way to restore that reef is to work with natural processes, and the fish are the most important force there. So if you can create all of your corals in a small patch, the fish will come in right away and start to clean everything, dust the corals off, pee-pee in the corals, giving them all the fertilizer they need, and once it's clean, the babies start coming to that area. So you can jumpstart natural recovery by working with the species on the reef. What is so cool about this is a nature-based solution. Mother Nature helping her to accelerate her own natural solutions that she normally would have hundreds of years to implement, but now she only has a few decades because of us. So we're helping Mother Nature to do her own solutions. Part of the strategy is learning all these techniques as well, but you make your decision on what technique you want to use. And if there's a technique that somebody else is using in another country and it works for you, please use it and share that knowledge. This is working really well. We were having this problem or that problem. The process is all about using your mind, opening your eyes, and trial and error. So I recommend in your pilot studies, you just go, observe, try to open your eyes as big as possible and look and do it and watch and see what's happening and just really learn. Let the environment teach you which is the best way. This is what I've learned the last 30 years. And there are colleagues that are working on this with me now. And these colleagues and partners are going to be taking you through the details of how to actually do this work. And you know, you're going to become one of our colleagues too. You're going to be involved in this coral work in some way. And so welcome to the team.